Well, welcome back. So to start off this table, I want to turn the legs first, and that will give me the basis to work off of everything. My little template here, my story stick that I like to use with most of the measurements marked out. I've got it about 80% figured out in my head, so we'll see where it goes from there. And to keep it consistent, I've got this little center finding jig. It just slides over one end, or I can tap in the awl to find the center, and that should hopefully, if they're not perfectly centered, at least keep them parallel. So I have to cut the apron pieces for this thing, and this is my highly scientific way of setting it up for scale. And I know we wanted the base to be narrow and sort of short, so these side pieces roughly signify the width of the top, and then my ruler here is roughly how long it'll be. So I need to lay out where the dowels are going to go. I have my sides marked of where I want to drill and figured out with the dowel max. I used a spacer of some scrap to get it pretty much right dead center, which will actually work out real great. And to keep myself organized, I took out this last pinhole just so I can keep this thing in the same orientation whenever I take it off and rotate it to this way. That way I get consistent placing on all the faces that I'm going to drill. Okay, so I have these drilled in this stretcher piece, and the thing with this is not self-centering, so I had to space this with 3 washers to get it center-ish. So I want to be real careful about making sure that I set this thing up the same way each time for one piece. So I have my tops marked and my inside marked. So I want the clamps to be on the inside of this thing, so it's just got to be a mirror image. So without shifting, I can set it up this way. Because this thing is not fully centered. Now if I take my little calipers here, this is about 8.4 millimeters on one side, measuring the same hole. The offset is 9.3. So not perfectly centered, but to get it consistently set up, you just have to be wary of where you place your clamps and how you set this whole jig up. So every time I do something, I try to basically do as little math as possible. So I'm just using this offcut actually from the whole leg to get an offset here. And I just have to do this twice, so 2 legs will get these lower side stretchers, which will accept, you know, the centerpiece, which will fit in here. But basically this just allows me to get the same distance from the bottom, and I'm using my table saw as a reference, table saw top, to the top here. So that's how I get my consistency for these sort of placements. So decided to pre-stain and pre-finish the whole thing before gluing up. So either of these pieces, I figured staining on the lathe would give me way more access to all the little grooves and little spots in here. So decided to do it this way. That way I can glue it all up and it'll be done, essentially just minor glue cleanup. These top pieces are cut to width, so I have to align them. I'm going to use the dowel max for that because this one's just a little bowed, but no big deal. So I'll set up. Okay, so we gotta lay these out, and I'm just setting them to however I want. Had them marked up. All I'm gonna do here is just mark these with a pencil, so I can then set my router up just to these lines. And this does not have to be perfect in any way, shape, or form, just straight for this to fit in. So I have this set up in the drill press. I'm going to drill holes to make slots for these threaded inserts and bolts to attach to the tabletop. The whole idea on these C channels is that the centerpiece is the one that gets bolted pretty tight, and then these side pieces are just pretty much hand tight, and I'm using some 1/4 bolts here for this. See, that's tight enough. And then these I will do until they're snug, and then back it off just a bit. So as the wood expands and contracts this way, it can move in these slots. So I got my buttons and my slots. Now this comes in, and this sits lower than the top of this board. So when you screw from the bottom, it will pinch upwards, clamping the top to the front. Okay, so the top surface area is pretty large, while the base is pretty narrow. So instead of just messing around with measurements, when I mount this thing, I'm just gonna drill some mounting or locating pins with this guy. And I have them marked, you can kind of tell. I'll place it between the slots where the buttons will go, right here and right here, just so I don't have any interference, potentially. So this is the plan. I have these spacers that mark out essentially the base to be centered on the tabletop. So it can't go farther than this, obviously can't go farther than this. I have the holes drilled in here, so I've got these little dowel locators, so I should be able to put them in, line them up against this and the fence on both sides, drop it to locate my holes. I got my indents marked. Got my divot. Right there. I got my depth collar on this thing. Just has a right angle drill guide set with the depth stop. Boom. Fits. Oh, they're solid. So now with the locating pin, the frame can't move, I can just drop it and install it. So I got all my buttons here. So they hang a little higher. So as I screw down, this will bend and pinch and squeeze the top to this while allowing this whole situation to move freely as the wood will expand and contract this way just a little bit. Then these side ones will just hold it on to hold it to the frame. I drilled these middle ones and I realized I ran into this, but that's not actually going to make any difference, so it'll be fine.